going to wait for a couple of my colleagues so we can have a quorum, but we are in committee, so I wanted to bring this meeting to, not to order, but to decorum. So if we can just keep your voices down. I know a lot of people are having to go through reports and various things for the committee meeting, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll get started momentarily. I know folks have other busy days as well, so I appreciate that. And we also, what we're going to do is we'll go through a number of items from the departments prior to opening it up for public comment, so we can jump into the public comment on those items prior to us voting, but after we have a quorum, so we can meet those obligations as well. We have cards on every item in any event, and so with that, though, let's go ahead and read in on item 6 that we have a technical correction for the record.
Item 6 is a mayor and city administrative officer report relative to a fiscal year 2016 Urban Area Security Initiative grant budget modification. Recommendation 2A of that report, the total transferred to should be $1,353,888, not the not $438,682. So
okay.
The correction is $1,353,887.
Okay, so we'll revisit that as a vote after public comment in a quorum, but at least the technical correction has been made into the record. We'll make sure it's announced prior to the vote as well, so public comment, they'll know about that. And then on, why don't we go ahead and hear then from the department on we'll start on item 1.
Item 1 is a verbal discussion with the Information Technology Agency to provide a status update of the equipment lease purchase of replacement radios for the Los Angeles Police Department and Los Angeles Fire Department.
Great, thank you very much. And I thank the department for coming to the table. I know this was scheduled just as a quick update, knowing full well that the instruction that was approved by council for the acquisition was to have 120 days to actually have a full written report and implementation plan back after the development of a working group. So this is just to make sure we're on track and see how you guys are all doing on this. So,
good morning, Brian Ganley, Chief Information Officer, LAPD. I'm here with representatives from the Fire Department and the Information Technology Agency, and I have good news on our status report. We have received all of the equipment which has satisfied the lease agreement. So that equipment taken into inventory, now being handled by Motorola for engraving, asset tagging, programming, etc. Our kickoff meeting for our design phase is scheduled for next week on the 13th. We have a project team consisting of a project manager from each of the 3 departments. And then we have a large team to handle the logistics that are necessary in all 3 of those departments. So we'll be getting that larger group together next week to begin that design phase.
Great. And in that design phase, will there be a scope of the items that you will be covering?
Yes, there's quite a bit of work there for both the logistics, the programming, the specification of the details that we talked about during the process at council and in committee, specifying those individual accessories, which officers and which members of each department may need which accessories, all of those types of details to be worked out in the design phase, along with several technical issues like programming, etc.
Okay. And in that also, will there be any type of survey or outreach to officers in terms of the additional equipment for example, accessories and adapters, and is that going to be part of the scope as well, so we know as we're deploying them what we'll be requesting from Motorola?
To be determined, but I would imagine yes. We have to do that type of outreach in order to finalize the equipment that we'll need.
Right. And then on that also, will the scope include staffing for distribution?
Yes, I think we've put together teams so far, so discussion of what the logistics are, the shared responsibilities, and what staffing changes we might need to make to the team that we've already assembled will depend on some of those details to be determined during the design phase.
Okay. And then lastly, I guess, and probably one of the most important elements is the timeline for implementation and rollout. Knowing full well that we have a modified plan from the original proposal to extend that implementation phase, as well as a retention on the previous radios. They're allowing us to keep in stock for added benefit. So that will be part of the plan as well.
Yes, sir. I think we share an aggressive goal of getting all of the portables out by the end of this calendar year. That's when the end of life is for the older radios. So we hope to have the newer portables in the hands of every officer at every department by the time that happens. Then, of course,
I'm not sure that was the intent of the final agreement. I think the intent was a slower phase-in, not all of them deployed citywide, and because we still have shelf life left on existing, and they are interoperable in terms of both will work and communicate on our existing system. So if we can revisit that with ITA and make sure that we look at that.
Yes, sir. I think that'll be discussed during the kickoff next week.
Yeah, because I know that the full plan has to be approved prior to deployment of any of the systems by the council. So we want to make sure that that's looked at as well. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Look forward to hearing back. So we'll probably schedule this for another update to make sure that we see some of the documents and we're all on the same page and working together on that. So that'd be great. On item 2, let's just go right into, unless, Joe, do you have anything on item 1? On item 2, let's just go right into item 2 then.
Item 2 is an Information Technology Agency report relative to the comprehensive technology assessment and roadmap needs of the Los Angeles Police Department and the Los Angeles Fire Department.
Morning.
Excellent. We can go ahead and open up.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, Ted Ross, General Manager of the Information Technology Agency. Certainly, I know this committee fully appreciates the importance of the role that technology plays at the City of Los Angeles. And to be honest, that role is extremely important, obviously, when it comes to the role of public safety. There's, little more important than getting technology in the hands of our public safety professionals to allow them to have effective and transparent policing or allow them to be effective at firefighting and paramedic work. Of course, this requires strong strategic planning in the realm of IT as well as investment. So at the request of council in this committee, the ITA worked very closely with the Los Angeles Police Department and Fire Department and my counterparts, Brian and Scott, in regards to reviewing technology planning, assessment of technology, the needs of the departments around technology, budget prioritization, et cetera. And we did a very, I think, rapid job to try to get this report back to the committee to have this discussion. And so what I would like to do, I'd like to turn it over to LAPD, to Brian, to start to kind of summarize for the committee the IT strategic approach and to highlight some core requirements at this time.
Great.
Thank you. I want to thank Mr. Ross, Mr. Porter. I think this process has been very helpful to all three agencies, but certainly for LAPD. And I think it's built upon existing relationships and really formalized, in addition to the points that I'll go over that are LAPD specific, it's formalized a collaborative relationship, a series of regular meetings, and quite a bit of discussion, not just from the three of us at the table here, but from our staff as well at each of the agencies. And I think in my brief time here, I've seen a tremendous change and improvement in that. I think some of those things may have existed before, but I think as people in the chairs change, sometimes they need to be reinvigorated. And I think that's happened as part of this process. So I'll take just a few minutes and run through the 4 key focus areas that are highlighted for LAPD in the assessment report that you have. The first one I won't spend too much time on. It's really about radios. Having just discussed that in the previous item, I'll move on immediately unless there's any more questions.
That's fine. Great.
Okay. Second item, Consolidated Records Management System. This is the third highest budget priority department-wide in our budget process this coming fiscal year. It's really about data modernization. It's about getting legacy applications that are in many cases 20 or 30 years old, currently running on a mainframe that's supported by ITA, off of that mainframe and onto modern technology. The reasons for doing this include several things. One of the probably more critical, although at least forward-facing, is just the ability to support a mainframe on an ongoing basis. Over time, staffing becomes challenging, and those skill sets that were 20, 30 years ago are harder to find today. So I think that ITA has done an excellent job, but I recognize that there's a burden there for the continuing operation of that type of legacy equipment. So we're planning to, as quickly as we can, move through this process to get off of that equipment.
What's the sort of end of useful life on the current systems and mainframes and legacy systems we have now?
I could speak to that. There's a few floating factors. One aspect is the programming languages and the support there. We have some systems that are actually run off assembly language, and so we have a minimal number of staff who have such an expertise in an antiquated type of system. We have other aspects that are run on COBOL, and so COBOL, once again, while it may not be as antiquated as assembly, you can certainly get some more people, but it's still very difficult. No one's learning COBOL in college. No one's coming out of college and could support any of those skills. So you pay a premium, and it's very difficult to obtain the types of folks who could support the software. On the hardware itself, we're looking in the next year or two to actually have to replace the mainframe itself. That hardware, it goes end of life. So there's a very important time frame there. And as LAPD was alluding to, we have aggressively been getting departments and applications off of the mainframe. And so we're actually getting to the point where public safety, LAPD specifically, may end up being the final department and the final set of systems that are on that mainframe, which makes it a very expensive proposition in addition to all the difficulties.
So the mainframe and the main one you're talking about, it's due to be replaced when?
In the next year or two.
In the next year or two.
Yes.
And what is on the, so that's the back end. On the front end user experience, what's the difference? Sort of walk us through that experience and what those pros and cons are.
So on the front end, this is where our connected officer and connected vehicle program that I think we've discussed in front of committee before come into play. Getting data into and out of the mainframe is an arduous task. There aren't the same reporting tools. Mainframes were not designed with mobility in mind. So moving off the mainframe is really key to our efforts to be a data-driven department, to get that data into the hands of the officers in the field when they need that information for situational awareness, for other activities. And so that's the driving force behind doing this, regardless of, even if the mainframe weren't legacy and end of life, we would need to move in this direction anyway to make those visions possible.
Now, I know we've taken bits and pieces that have come over the years through this committee from various grant funds and moved components, but not, I guess, the main bulk of what needs to be moved off a mainframe hasn't been completed. Is there a financing plan and a mechanism and a vehicle to get to a point where we're not then spending so much money to replace the mainframe in the year or two that we need to? And has there been an analysis on, I think the last analysis that was really done, and I'm not sure it was done at a micro level, was the Guntner report in 2016 talking about this as a priority, but is there an actual strategic implementation plan and a finance plan to do that in time in the next year or two, so we don't have to go out and have you before us in a year or two saying we need millions of dollars for a new mainframe that we're trying to get off of completely anyway? Where might we be in that discussion?
And I think up to this point, funding has been difficult for this project, for the RMS implementation. So far, we have relied on some grant funds for a couple of different projects that help move us along. So that's why this year we have as our third highest priority that $4 million request to support software licensing, project management, and professional services to make sure that this program can be implemented in the time frame that we need to see that implemented. I think realistically, we'd see a request over the next couple of fiscal years as well to finish this implementation off. And of course, depending on that funding level, the timeframe may change.
So in closing the loop on that, first priority being the communication systems, we can sort of check that box. It's moving. This is the third. We haven't gone through yet what the second one is, priority-wise. And on this one, though, being so critically important, would it be possible, working with ITA, to put together a plan on funding, on what are we looking at, what do we really need, and then working with the CAO to figure out what type of either financing is available and how do we get there sooner rather than later, because this is so critically important. And so what might that look like in that space of putting together a plan to develop that timeline and funding mechanism?
Yes, I think much of that information exists.
Okay.
What I think would be particularly helpful about the suggestion would be working with ITA and making that close tie with the mainframe and the costs associated with the mainframe. As of yet, we have not done that.
I'll tell you what. So when you're ready and you can put together such a plan where it can be presented to this committee, and then we can also bring it to Budget and Finance, let us know. And let's get that scheduled for whenever you're ready. I'm not even going to put you on the spot to ask you how long that would take, because I know you have so much on your plate, especially with the new working group. But it's critically important that we have such a plan written, and working with the CAO to come back. And we need to make sure that it's prioritized. So I want to make sure we work closely on that front. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with the direction moving forward and appreciate the presentation. One of the most frustrating things I had to deal with was a failed MDC, or about to turn on a computer to write a report and the system's down, or walking into CAD to get some Part 1 crimes year to date and system down. And got to be one of the most frustrating, I know, even to our patrol officers and our administration as well. So in conducting your assessment, what would you say that the departments need are the most pressing technological needs for both the fire department and the police department?
And I think in answering that, I would put RMS, as we've just discussed, at the very top of that list. The other one that I have not mentioned yet, and I want to give some time to Mr. Porter as well, is PC replacement. So that's highlighted in our report back to the committee as well.
I noticed that about 3,000 computers need to be replaced based on the report.
I think that figure's wrong.
Okay.
I was going to call you out on that.
That's a lot of computers.
Yeah, based on your report, I had some questions on that too.
And it looks like $4 million of new records management system, among other requests. So that's a big number of computers that need to be replaced. Is that legit?
Yes, sir. I would probably agree with Mr. Chair that it's probably a larger number. I think we're playing catch up at this point, and I think 3,000 was determined as probably the most we could physically do in 1 year. I think we probably need to do that for 2 years at least. I have some information that's not directly in the report, but of those 3,000, those would be replacing computers that
I did want to make a note for the public that's listening in as well. I'm sorry that Councilmember Wu is here, and we do have a quorum, but just want to put that on the record. Thank you.
Of those 3,000 that we propose to replace, those are all computers that are at least 7 years old, if not older. We have another large group of computers that are already 6 years old. What we would like to catch up to, which is in accordance with ITA's best practices and policies, is computers replaced every 5 years. So in order to do that, we're behind. We would need to catch up, and then each year we would need to replace 1,600 of our 8,000 computers. So playing a little bit of catch up for a couple of years, hopefully, and then getting on that recurring annual track to replace 20% of that fleet.
Yeah, see, that's what I thought. These numbers are low based on my knowledge of the 5-year replacement life cycle for these. I think we're also up against, I think it's more. This is probably one of the biggest frustrating things I hear from officers in any division, in any station. You ask them anything and say, what's your biggest gripe with the department or with your resources? And believe it or not, they don't say it's not enough officers on the street. They don't say it's any other issue.
Right.
They constantly pound on the desk and yell at their computers and watch the crash cycle come up and watch the little things move around and the clock waiting. We're pushing so much technology, particularly now video, where you have to look at the videos and write your reports, and you can't load them. They don't load. An average officer, patrol officer, their experience on one shift, I've heard as much as an hour of just computer time of waiting to get an email attachment, waiting to log on to various systems. Some of it's the mainframe issues, but most of it's they don't have enough RAM. They're outdated, 7 or 8 years old. And by the way, when we got them, they were probably already 2 years old because it takes so long for our procurement. So when these were actually manufactured as opposed to when they were delivered and installed, some of these are probably, quite frankly, 10 years old, which for basic word processing is great. Surfing the internet is fine, but they're doing so much and they're running multiple applications at once, they just don't work. It's fascinating to me because I see a lot of the brass and folks in the that are here from all the way to chiefs and all the way down, all nodding their heads, yes, this is a major headache and problem. It's also a major drain on resources and time. To imagine that a patrol officer on an average shift is spending an hour in front of a computer just logging on and it crashing and booting down, is all those hours, every DP that's lost in the field, that's lost in investigation. I mean, it's just crazy. And so I can't thank you enough for bringing this not only to a top priority, but I would say these numbers are, and then we have the other issues of obsolete operating systems coming into play. I understand Microsoft is going to be ending their
Windows 7.
Their Windows 7, which is what we're on, in 2020?
2020.
Okay, so
January.
So what that means is any critical updates are gone. I mean, that's insanity. So what I'd like to see is this committee working closely with you and for you to report back on replacing everything we physically can replace, because again, it takes a lot of people to do this, as quickly as possible, to get them on that 5-year cycle as quickly as possible.
Correct.
To ignore this 3,000 request, because I think it's way grossly underestimated. To come back with a budget request and what it would take to get there, because it's just too important, and so I'd like to make that a priority.
And I'd certainly like to reinforce it. We hear you loud and clear, and we've been working very closely, pursuant to the requests of this committee. I've sent my best desktop support folks, working very closely with LAPD's best. And we're not only just looking at what it takes to replace machines, what's loaded on those machines, what's loading down the machines, what can slow down machines, network configurations related to those machines,
Right.
32 versus 64-bit. I mean, all the aspects of it, because we want to ensure that officers have the best possible technology to get their job done. We completely appreciate the frustration.
And I think the general
associated with it.
public and the taxpayers understand full well, these aren't bells and whistles.
Yeah.
These are the tires on the vehicle.
Correct.
And if you don't replace them and they're shot, we're stuck. And that's exactly where we're at today. So if you can come back and update that with the idea of a 5-year cycle replacement, replacing all 8,000 before we hit to 2020, and what it would take to do that, including, but not limited to, looking at contracting out for the implementation, just for the installations. I mean, we need to get this done. We got to make it a top priority, and stop kicking the can down on the road on this, because it's just one of those things that is critically important. I want to make sure I hear from fire too. And
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think through this process, and I would echo what Brian was saying, we sort of reinvigorated the relationship between ITAPD and fire, all for the positive. The fire department in 2016 actually did an IT strategic plan. Our planning process is meant to be very well aligned with the fire chief's strategic plan. The fire chief is issuing a new strategic plan in the next month or so, and we will update our IT strategic plan to align with that as well, so that all of our IT investments and priorities are really being driven by the fire chief's operational priorities. Our section of the report basically outlines our top 10 initiatives. Inside of those initiatives, there are several projects. I'll just highlight for you in this current fiscal year right now. Obviously, the radio project is significant. We're making a lot of investment in our mobile data technology, in our ABL dispatch, in our fire prevention system, and in what I'm calling HR-related systems, which is sort of the non-sexy back-end systems, but the fire department in particular has some pretty significant risks with its scheduling and manpower deployment system, which is more than 25 years old, so that's sort of on the plate this year, and we have a budget request to extend that project into next year. So those are kind of our priorities in terms of IT investment. While we do have the same issues with our PCs and fire stations, it's not to the same scale, but just in this conversation and through this process, we'll revisit our ask for the same reason, right?
Right.
We can't deploy any of this stuff.
Right.
I don't think we're quite in that same position, but I know in the last couple of budget requests, those things pretty easily get taken out, and then all of a sudden you're behind and have to replace them all. So
if you can look at that analysis as well, and then obviously I think the main focus right now is going to be AVL, and so under a separate council file, we'll bring that back. I think it's pretty ripe now, so during the next meeting or two, we'll have you back and
absolutely
walk us through where we're at with that as well, because that's critically important. So, okay, anything else from my colleagues? Okay, no, thank you all very much. So we'll keep this in committee, and we'll hear back as soon as you're ready on those items.
Great,
So,
thank you.
All right, look forward to it. Thank you and thank you all for working seamlessly together now. It's really helpful. Yeah, very, very helpful. Really, truly appreciate it. Okay, with that, colleagues, let's go ahead and go into public comment now. We have multiple comment cards from many. We'll go ahead and start with Mr. Previn. And so, Mr. Previn, you've got items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 2 minutes on those, and then you'll have 1 minute for general public comment. And if you can, for both the items and as well as general public comment, speak to items that are only under the purview of this committee, as you well know. Thank you.
Right. It's Eric Previn. I'm a resident of CD2. I live in Studio City, and I have been following this committee's work recently. Item number 1, which you just heard from the chaps about, which has to do with the replacement of radios for the LAPD, was, well, I wanted to update you because during the presentation in City Hall, in which it was shoved through, they referred to a county RFB, actually, but it was an RFB, which means request for bids. And we looked at that, and that one actually had not been approved. It was being protested during the time that the city represented to its council that they were moving forward, the mayor. So I wanted to bring that to your attention that at the time that was not actually, had been protested. And I think the reason that there was a protest, I don't know exactly, but I do know, I'm getting those records, that the competitors to the Motorola bid $10 million against what Motorola was bidding $17 million. So there was a huge spread for what are purportedly very reputable radios that have some of the other features like FirstNet and things. I think you remember during that hearing, there was some opposition and discussion. Now, at item number 2, you brought up Ted Ross and celebrating that they're all working well together, but Ted Ross has been systematically, I don't know how to put it because it's a strange kind of thing for a head of technology to be engaged in, but he's been instructing ITA employees to make members of the public who testify at meetings virtually unrecognizable, which is oddly in direct violation of something called Council Rule 93. So I would ask that he be reassessed. This is not the right man until he understands that the public wants transparency and wants to be able to hear about these meetings being cast over here and over there.
Again,
That's why this is a special meeting.
The actual agenda items, thank you.
Yeah, okay, fine. I'm against accepting gifts of drones or gifts for groups that will deploy drones at this time.
Thank you. Okay, so 1 minute for general public comment.
Okay, so in the general public comment, I would just like to say that when we get unmanned aerial system gifts, it is a kind of a red flag, since there's been a lot of discussion about that and how that would be deployed appropriately. So I would ask the council to proceed cautiously. And I think that the idea of accepting gifts is another one of the ways we get preferential treatment for vendors. This is how Motorola and Taser, these companies, they give a little gift and then everybody grapples around and makes a decision that is not in the public's interest. So that's my big concern. And I would just direct the folks who listen to this very important meeting in our community to the intercept.com, where my brother and a reporter named Aileen Brown wrote about how the Skirball fire, the origin thereof, was problematic and questionable, and how there are other causes of the dangerous fire conditions in our city. So we need to be very cautious about not scapegoating the homeless in that regard. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Herman. Ask you to, again, abide by the same rules and not yell in the microphone as well. And you've got cards on every item. So 2 minutes, and then 1 minute for general public comment.
So what do we call effective policing nowadays, Mr. Richard T. Fink? Who are the victims of crimes? What is a California emergency service? Well, apparently it must have worked for Wayne Spindler, because he wasn't incarcerated by false charges and accusations, which he was a victim of a crime. Wayne Spindler asked you to pay him on an outside settlement. Could have resolved all our issues.
Stick to the items on the agenda, please.
I'm dealing with the victim of crime, Wayne Spindler.
Wayne
I'm
Spindler's
on
not on the
topic.
agenda. Stick to the agenda.
He was a victim. And then I go into the next item regarding the Bain Act, Basic Car Area Boundary Study. What kind of fucking mess is that? Spending money on an outside car boundary. Don't you got anything better to do? Didn't you hear what we talked about on item 1 and 2? Resources and computers out of date, a system broken. How ineffective is that? And I'm down to my 51 seconds. Regarding drones, we're going to take what? Outside money for $31,000 for a drone? So we could fly up and down. Maybe by using a drone, we could see into the minds of our politicians and see what directions are leading us into this fucked up society we're building. One of no privacy. One of drones. Welcome, Miss Monica Rodriguez. 45 minutes late to this.
And stick to the agenda item.
Oh, I'm sorry. So in a matter of the Los Angeles police, on behalf of the drones, that I and many other constituents are against, because even your vest cameras don't work. So why would that work as well?
Sorry, 1 minute.
Now, at 15004, regarding public safety, and Richard T. Fink knows very well what the hell I'm talking about as he sits there with that big smile on his face. You know, you can't DBA a business of a restaurant under the name of the Spearmint Rhino. You can't take a restaurant and disguise a gentleman's club where you get nice lap dances, the kind that you were speaking about in your sexual harassment, Mr. Englander, and your office.
Items under the purview of this office.
It deals with public safety. When you're harassing and retaliating against people under the public safety and criteria of the Spearmint Rhino, where gentlemen are being fucked on a lap dance in return for money, that is public interest
Now
and
you're
safety.
yelling into the mic. You're disrupting this meeting.
Don't you fucking get it,
Don't
you
yell into the
boy?
mic.
I'm talking. I
Your
got
time is
3
up.
seconds.
No, you're
Fuck
disrupting this
you,
meeting.
42 U.S.C. 1983.
You're disrupting this meeting if you're going to continue along.
Disrupt the meeting?
You're still disrupting this meeting. So,
I'm not disrupting the
okay,
meeting.
sergeants, can you please escort him out? He continues to yell after his time is up.
This little fucking Jew, Peter, is always harassing us and kicking us out of the meeting.
He's continuing to disrupt this meeting. Continuing to disrupt this meeting. Sergeants, please escort him out.
You don't have to touch me. You don't have to fucking touch me. You know, there's a Bain Act that says you can't coerce people and threaten people out of public
So,
meetings.
5150
Just
hold.
like what they say, big ears. Stop my
Continuing to disrupt this meeting. Thank you.
flat
Thank you. Any folks that have never been here before? No? Okay. All regulars? All right. Moving on to public comment. I also want to welcome Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez. Good morning. Is there Chuck on item 1? No? Okay. General Doggin? Morning.
General Doggin.
On item 10?
Organizer with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. And I'm just here today just to say no to LAPD receiving any more drones. When you look historically about the programs they got, you look at the equipment they got, it's nothing that they have that they haven't manipulated with a criminal twist on it. And so I'm here to say no. Don't give them no more drone. Don't give them a drone. But what bothers me more is this committee. Because y'all guys continue to give them this equipment. You continue to play Santa Claus for the LAPD, give them everything they want. And then when stuff crash land, you ain't nowhere around. I never hear you in the discipline part. I never hear you go and speak out at the police commission about, they messed up the equipment that you gave them. But you gave them the antennas, and for the radio cars, you gave them their own body cameras, which they manipulate their own body cameras. I don't want to talk about the cadet program that they done manipulated. But now here it is, you again finna give them something else. When we gonna start holding y'all accountable? Because you the problem. You continue to get them, and from now on, we're gonna start holding you accountable.
All right, thank you. Next speaker, please. Hamid Khan, come on up on item 10.
I had filled out a card for 3 different items.
Yeah, I see that. Okay, so so we'll go ahead and give you the 2 minutes on all those items,
I thought it was 1 minute for each item.
unless you spill out multiple comment cards. So those are the rules. And then so you have two minutes for all those items. Okay, so go ahead.
So I don't have 3 minutes. I'm just trying to clarify the process.
Correct. You have 2 minutes on all of those items that you
So
filled
1
out cards
minute
for.
each doesn't matter. It's not 1 minute for each item.
It's collectively 2 minutes total for all those items. Correct.
Okay. Well, let me just start off with the technology piece and the record management system. I think what's not being discussed, what's not being asked is the information sharing environment and the way information moves through these record management systems. You're looking at the law enforcement information sharing program and the way technology is advancing and predictive algorithms and analytics are moving as well. What is happening is that people and criminal behavior is being reframed. And as these record management systems share this information, it's having a pretty dire impact on communities out there. The second piece I wanted to speak about was the Urban Area Security Initiative, that what is happening is that this money has just become an entitlement program. And I would direct you all to look at a study that Senator Tom Coburn from Oklahoma had done in 2012-2013. He retired in 2014, and the title of the study is Safety at Any Price. And he said that a clear danger to the Urban Area Security Initiative grant program is that it would be transformed from a risk-based program into an entitlement program. So there's got to be a clear audit of where this money is going. And lastly, the issue of drones. In October, what you saw was mass protests, mass mobilization. People got arrested right here on Main and First because people spoke out against the drones. The LAPD owned, and Beatrice Girmala, the assistant chief, is here. As per her own statements, LAPD put out is a call for surveys. Out of the 1,600 surveys, the results that they gave us, only 97 people approved of the drones. Then they put out a policy and they asked people's feedback on emails, and their own numbers showed that out of 1,100 emails, only 7 people approved of that policy. Then they had 4 town hall and community meetings, overwhelming rejection of the drones. We had over 5,500 petition signatures, several town halls and surveys, so people have completely rejected the drones. Even the Board of Police Commissioners voted 3-1. It wasn't a unanimous vote. So we're asking you as representatives of the people today
to
say no to these drones and
listen
to the overwhelming rejection and concerns that people have showed about it.
So next speaker is Jamie Garcia. And 1 minute for item 10.
Okay, since community input is so undervalued here, I think we need to just repeat again how the Los Angeles Police Commission completely ignored and rejected what the community was saying. And Beatrice Gamrala is here, and what's interesting, when she was presenting the information about the surveys, about the emails, she rejected to, or refused to acknowledge that community members had actually sent in postcards throughout all the city of LA showing that they rejected the drones. And she refused to even acknowledge that those cards were submitted. And it's quite disappointing to see that someone who is at such a high ranking of LAPD would actually ignore that these cards were sent in. And you're sitting right here, and I still think it's a shame that you are representing.
If you can please address the committee and not the audience.
To acknowledge that those cards were sent in.
Oh. Thank you.
So I think it's important, since you undervalue what the community says, that the community takes their opportunity to say what's necessary to be heard, because we're continue to not be heard by this subcommittee and by the police commission.
Thank you. Next speaker. Okay, that concludes all the speakers, all the comment cards. Did you have one in? Don't have another. We have new electronic systems, so we'll have to wait a second. Okay, Jed. Yeah, come on in. Item 10. And you're the final speaker, I believe. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Jamie just said. You know, a vast majority of the community has come out and said no to drones. And once again, you know, at the police commission where they voted on this, Steve Sobroff said, you know what, I don't care what you think. We trust the LAPD, so we're voting yes? Excuse me? What kind of representation is that? And you guys are supposed to represent the people too, so who are you going to stand with there? Are you going to stand with millionaires like Steve Sobroff and Matt Johnson? Or are you going to stand with the people who have stood up repeatedly and said they do not trust the LAPD to have drones? I mean, what's it going to be? It's going to be very telling right now. And you should ask Beatrice Gamrala about the input she got from the public. Overwhelmingly, everyone said no. And yes, people got arrested, including myself, standing up for these community members, who you are all ignoring to normalize drones, which are going to be taking over the sky in swarms if you normalize them right now. That's what's going to happen in the future. Don't laugh at that. That's what's going to happen if you normalize them right now.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so that concludes public comment and general public comment. So we'll close public comment and general public comment for the meeting. We're going to go ahead and take items 3, 4, 5, 6 with the technical correction, 7, 8, and 11 for consent.
Move the items.
Okay. And do you want to reiterate the technical correction prior to approval?
On item 6, the City Administrative Officer report, there's a technical correction to recommendation 2A. The total that's being transferred to should be $1,353,887.
Okay. So those are approved with that technical correction. Okay, without objection, that'll be the order. On items 1 and 2, we'll keep those in committee for the report backs from the departments. We're going to go ahead and hear item 10 now, and then we'll swing over to item 9.
Item 10 is a Police Commissioner's report relative to the acceptance of the donation from the Los Angeles Police Foundation of small unmanned aerial systems to be used by the Special Weapons and Tactics Team for the benefit of the Los Angeles Police Department Metropolitan Division.
Great. Thank you very much, Chief. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Englander and council members. Is this thing on?
Yes. You might want to bring the mic up a little bit.
1, 2, 3. Okay, I'll bring it closer.
So if you could, you know, certainly there has been a lot of interest in the Los Angeles Police Department and utilization of drones. We've heard a lot from the public over the years, and as much as moments ago, and all what I would consider incredibly valid concern over this utilization. We heard the same thing with the fire department. And when we moved forward with the fire department, we did so in such a manner that it was completely transparent and very specific in what types of incidents, how it would be deployed, how it would be reported when it was deployed. And in fact, have had some recent successes that have been shared with and no concern or complaints that have been brought to this committee's attention with the deployment of these with the fire department. And so if you can walk us through, this is, I think what's more important is not so much the donation of what's on the agenda, but the policy behind it, which is also on the agenda, to look at in what types of instances they would be deployed, who makes that call, how is it reported, where is it reported, how is that to ensure that we address the public's concern over this.
Absolutely. What I'd like to do is give you an overview of
Great.
how we started this conversation and what we saw the needs existing out there for public safety and officer safety as well were in 2017. And then I'm glad to go over the policy, the criteria, the approval process with you, and then discuss the four UAS devices that we are looking at with the donation funds.
Terrific.
If that's
Please.
all right with
That'd be
you.
great.
I'll just go over an overview.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So in 2017, the department took a very comprehensive look at the challenges to public safety and officer safety in terms of not only the potential for terrorism-related incidents, but also aggressive and violent activity at the hands of active shooters, suspects armed with unique or superior firepower, or those intent on doing harm from a position of advantage against law enforcement and the community. As de-escalation became a very real goal for the department in volatile and high-risk situations, it was time to also look at tools and technology which could be used and aid in accomplishing the mission, while decreasing the risk to first responders and all Angelenos. Discussion began involving the Office of Special Operations, the Chief of Police, and the Police Commission regarding the use of small unmanned aerial systems, SUAS, or what is commonly referred to as drones. With the guidance of subject matter experts, research by LAPD's Special Weapons and Tactics Team, also known as SWAT, and the Air Support Division on how SUAS could keep the public and officers safe took place. Working with the Police Commission Subcommittee, a one-year pilot program policy was created to allow the department to test the use of SUAS in very specific circumstances, accompanied by a rigorous authorization and use process that would occur on an incident-by-incident basis. This is not a blanket use of SUAS. I want to be very clear on that. And the review process includes an approval or a denial of the use and deployment of the SUAS in those situations. Each use would be reported to the Chief of Police and the Police Commission, as well as to myself. And I'll go over the intricacies of that approval process. But let me go ahead with the general summary. The use of the SUAS would be limited to FAA-certified members of the LAPD SWAT team during high-risk critical incidents, among them barricaded suspects and active shooters. Rather than place a human being or a canine directly in harm's way to, for example, ascertain the location of an armed suspect, the SUAS could be introduced into a location to determine where the threat exists, what tactics would best be used, or if there were victims in need of assistance who are not yet identified as being in harm's way or critically injured. The SUAS would not be weaponized in any way. It would not be used to circumvent the search warrant process, nor would it be used to monitor such activities as First Amendment events. Research was done and devices were selected based on a variety of criteria, including concern for cost, durability, obstacle avoidance mechanisms, video credibility and capability, and ease of use and size. For reasons of versatility and flexibility in tactical deployment, 3 different platforms, meaning sizes, of SUAS were selected, primarily based on durability, ease of use, the need for training that would not be exorbitant in cost, for a total of 4 total devices used. And they would be the DJI Spark, which is a 7-inch SUAS, and that's 7 inches on the diagonal, 0.6 pounds, and that's at a cost of $829.44. 2 Phantom 4 SUAS is approximately 14 inches, 3 pounds, at a cost of $4,637.52. And 1 Matrice 100, approximately 25 inches, 10 pounds, at a cost of $26,061.40. The Los Angeles Police Foundation has agreed to fund this pilot project. With reverence for human life as the department's guiding principle, the goals set for this pilot project and program are looking at the potential for UAS deployment to be used in closely monitored and critically evaluated situations. I'm prepared to go into the criteria for SUAS deployment, Chairman, if you'd like me to do so at this time.
I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues for any questions and comments, and I do have one suggestion on this as well. So, Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the presentation, Chief.
Thank you.
I believe this is a good use of funds. I want to thank the Los Angeles Police Foundation. And if you look at most recently some of the national tragedies that have occurred of active shooters in our schools and beyond, I, as a police officer, will love to have that ability to use a resource like a UAS to assist in the incident. And if you look at the policy that is in place, barricaded suspect, active shooter, hostage situations, search and rescue operations, I would rather have put a UAS or a drone on the line instead of a police officer. So I believe this is a tool that's going to be used wisely, and I have faith and trust in the police department that it will be used in an appropriate way. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, if you're going to yell out, then you're disrupting the meeting. So, I want to add to that also, and again, and not only as a police officer and chair of public safety, but if you look at the fact that there are so many officers that put themselves into harm's way in these very specific situations, I think the policy was taken very carefully and crafted very delicately, that not only are they only the barricaded suspects, active shooters, and I want to make sure they're all on the record, assessments of explosive devices and explosions, hostage situations, natural disasters, hazardous material incidents, search and rescue, and perimeter searches of only armed suspects with superior firepower, an extraordinary technical advantage, or who is wanted for assault with a firearm against a police officer. What's more important is the preamble that comes before that, which says specifically that these may be deployed, but solely during these circumstances only. And that's critically important because it addresses the bulk of certainly what I've heard from the public on the police department deploying drones and what does that mean and when and how. Further, though, it's backed up with a very thought-out process of transparency that all videos would be recorded and retained and adhere to the data retention policy for video. In addition, it needs approval or denial prior to deployment. And then there will be postings on the department's website of when and why they were deployed under what specific incidents. I don't know what more you could ask for in transparency than that.
And I agree. I think what's very critical is just the department's possession of the UAS does not automatically mean that it will be deployed. The process in which the deployment actually occurs is very rigorous, with the SWAT commander there at scene having to receive the approval, the deputy chief level of the commanding officer of Counterterrorism and Special Operations Bureau before an approval or denial will take place. And then that would follow up with a phone call to me, a follow-up phone call to Chief Beck, and notification to the Police Commission. So this is not a blanket tool that is going to be deployed there, and I have to underscore, to monitor First Amendment type activity. Some of you may know during the Women's March, CNN had a drone and was authorized by the FAA to fly over the Women's March, which is a First Amendment activity. So the Los Angeles Police Department will not be engaging in that type of use of UAS. As you stated, Chairman, very, very specific. And our hope is to preserve life, regardless of who it is. If it's the suspect, the victims involved, the community, the officer, a canine, across the board. It's the preservation of life that we're talking about here. And if we have the opportunity to put a mechanical item in harm's way rather than somebody who's breathing and functioning as a human being or as an animal, I say that it's a worthy cause for us to support.
Absolutely. And I want to recognize we have been a cutting-edge department in technology and deployment of technology for the rest of the nation, if not the world, to watch. And the world has changed dramatically with higher visibility of attacks and terrorist threats, the utilization of robots for disarming explosive devices. I mean, a lot of the things that we've done technologically. But what goes into that, and as important, is the policies to back them up and the transparency in which they're shared with the public and how they're utilized is critically important. So, colleagues, what I'd like to do is add a recommendation to this, and that is to approve not only the donation but the policy, the underlying policy, but also to add to the policy that any modification from this policy shall be submitted to the Police Commission as well as the City Council for approval prior to implementation. So,
Thank you, Chairman. May I also add, today happens to be the 10-year anniversary that we lost the first SWAT officer in the line of duty, Randy Simmons, also known as 41 David, in Winnetka, as you know, on Welby Way.
Sure. Well
and
aware.
we keep him and his beautiful family in our thoughts and prayers. And we just wanted to share that with you, the timing of this presentation as well.
And I appreciate you sharing that. And thoughts and prayers to his family as well. And
Thank you.
hopefully this will prevent that next Randy Simmons and save lives. So I appreciate that.
We are very appreciative.
Colleagues, we'll go ahead and approve with that amendment.
Thank you for your support. We appreciate it.
So for clarification, the recommendation was to accept the donation with the condition that if there is a modification to the policy, it needs to go through.
It needs to be approved by the by the Police Commission, Public Safety, and the City Council.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And that's approved. Thank you. The next item. Excuse me. If you're going to disrupt this meeting, all right, sergeants, can you please show them out? Thank you very much. Don't disrupt this meeting, please. Okay, that's.
You guys have failed to serve the community.
Okay, thank you very much.
It was what Keisha Wilson's anniversary for Wicked killed her in jail.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, our final item is going to be item 9, and relative to the RFP of the LAPD Basic Car Area Boundary Study. Thank you. This is a long time in coming. So I appreciate all you coming up. I think we all know the history of the basic car, and it's probably critically overdue to update and do an analysis and a comprehensive study on the division lines as well as the actual basic car boundaries. And if you can walk us through what the timeline on the RFP would be and then what the process is. It says that they're going to be meeting with elected officials and stakeholders and patrol officers and personnel and captains. Is there an actual methodology for that outreach and communication plan? Because it says it in the RFP, but it's not really spelled out of how much and to what depth. And so if you could walk it, because I think that's critically important. That's where most of this information beyond data will come from, and that input's going to be critically important. So if you could walk us through that part of it, as well as the timeline, that'd be helpful.
Tyler Munhall, CAO. I also want to acknowledge the others at this table. We are representing the working group that developed the RFP. The RFP is essentially asking consultants that will be submitting proposals to propose how to approach what we're asking them to do. I know that so that will be the first thing, is to get their proposal back, and then the review team will look at that and try and determine which is the best approach in terms of outreach, the analysis of historical documents, their approach to doing the benchmarking study, and then making recommendations on how to improve the basic car areas.
Okay, and then my final question on that is there, let's assume we're going to make modifications, because I would believe that would be the outcome if we're going to go through this exercise, and I'm sure they're well overdue. Is there a cost to make those modifications and adjustments? Is it just maps on a page, or is it what goes into the back end of that?
Well, there are two scenarios that we're asking them to create for us. One is a scenario where there are additional resources available, financial, people, equipment, technology, and then we're also asking, so that we have something to compare that to, a scenario where they recommend changes to existing resources without additional resources.
Okay.
So we're trying to get...
Because if they come back, and right now we have, 138 basic cars?
168.
168 basic cars, and which should equate to 168 slows, and they come back and say you need 300. We just don't know, right? We have no idea what are there parameters to suggest that whatever you do come back with, if modifications need to be made, make them with the idea and recommendations with the idea that we would fit within the scope of no more than so many base. I mean, is there
We've asked
some?
In the RFP right now, we have them under the part where they can add resources, 3 different tiers of resources.
Okay.
High, medium, and low.
Right.
Adding resources, and then we have this other option of no additional resources. So we should be getting a realistic range of options.
Okay. Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your report. I do want to recognize my partner in this, Mike Bonin, to our council member. I want to thank him for partnering on this issue, on doing what we can to maximize our basic car plan, and I want to recognize John Gregory here at the table for his input and his commitment in helping our city staff craft this RFP. One thing of note I would like, if I can, Mr. Chair, is look at in the RFP proposal on page 7 on the existing basic car factors. One thing I didn't see and what I'd like to see, and something that I experienced many times, was being pulled away out of a basic car area for other duties and responses. So I'd like to know the average time that is spent outside, that officers are spending outside their respective basic car areas, and add that as one of the existing factors. In a time where it's, geographically we're challenged, parts of the valley, parts of the harbor, on the west side as well. I think it's something to take of note, and I'd like to see that at least in the report back.
Good point. So we'll go ahead and add that. Mr. Riff.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to join in support and just say how excited I am about the study. And this comes at the heels of recently where the LAPD and Chief Beck has increased augmentation of police officers at every police station by 10%. And that's been a joy going to the community and announcing that every police station will get a 10% augmentation of police officers, which results in anywhere from about 8 to 14 new officers which translates to anywhere from 1 to 4 basic cars per station. And everywhere I go, I only get a standing ovation or a round of applause for that increase. So I am very excited about what this report will yield, how we can improve the basic car even more, and see exactly where we're deficient in, so we could try to tackle that and try to help fund that. So I'm very excited about this report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I'm very much looking forward to this as well for an area geographically in parts of my district that are always feeling very strained, I think. And to your point, I think, Mr. Buscaino, I think it's really important to consider some of the other factors that are involved in how the deployment gets augmented based on the other needs in the immediate areas or depending on what the calls are. So I'm very much looking forward to this and seeing how we can continue to support our officers being most effective in service to our communities. So I'm looking forward to the results.
Appreciate, in fact, that just triggered another thought, that can we make sure that we include in this the fact that we don't have all the area jails open anymore, and that we have all of that time of a basic car, pulling them out of service to transport, and to recognize that and come up with options, whether they're additional transportation solutions, civilian transportation solutions, something that recognizes, and when Councilmember Buscaino suggested that we look at how often they're taken out of their basic car, this is probably one of the primary reasons. And so if we can recognize that and make sure they recognize that. And then the last thing, to make sure that they reach out also to the Los Angeles Police Protective League, who has a letter of support for this plan on file, and then also the Command Officers Association, to make sure that those two very important stakeholders have a seat at this table. And I think those are the final recommendations.
And they are part of the working group
Great.
as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So that is approved, and that concludes this meeting, I believe.
Is it approved with amendments? Or
Approved with those amendments, correct. The amendment is from Mr. Buscaino, just to be clear, that the study include an analysis of how much time is each basic car sort of out of their basic car area, as well as the recognition and an analysis of segmenting that of transporting because of the area stations closures, and then the outreach to the stakeholders, which were already included, so we don't have to modify that. Okay, so those are the two.
Thank
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
that transporting should include when the officer's at the jail waiting for...
The wall time.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we'll include that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, thank you very much. And with that, we are adjourned.
Well, they call wall time.